pleased to be able to bring you my completed British force from the American War of Independence for the rule set Sharp Practice 2. It's based on a brigade from 1777 for historical purposes, which consisted of the 4th, 23rd, 28th and 49th Regiments of Foot, which enabled me to draw from all of those in terms of uniform details and colours for painting them. There are also some Loyalists, so here you've got a couple of groups of the Queen's Rangers. So they're both modelled with rifles, but one's got bayonets fixed. I'll probably use the group on the left as the actual riflemen, and the group on the right to represent the centre companies that I think actually had muskets. And in terms of the leaders, they've got leader figures drawn from the command pack that were suitable for each of the groups. And they're very pleasing and satisfying uniform to paint. Just behind them here, you've got a group of British light infantry. So the two at the front are meant to represent the 4th King's Own with the blue facings and have got butterfly caps. And then behind them, you've got 4 that represent light infantry in the facings of the 28th, the North Gloucestershire Regiment. And they've got the chain caps on. And for the purposes of this, they've got a nominal leader figure there, who's a spare Highlanders officer miniature that I had that I've just added to them. Then the bulk of the actual infantry for the force are 2 groups of troops with dark green facings from the 49th Hertfordshire Regiment, including in there a sergeant with a waist sash on. I might add another spare figure later on so that he can be an additional leader. On the front right-hand side of the formation, the officer that I've modelled here, I actually did a little conversion using a part from the Perry French plastic kit. So he's got a French officer's sword there, an appropriate scabbard. And a little bit of narrative there is that there's some kind of young ensign or lieutenant, and he's inherited this sword perhaps as a family heirloom, as perhaps his father may have fought in the French Indian War in 1755, and then this has been passed down, and he's decided to carry it into the American War of Independence in his own service. Then to the right here, you've got a group of the 4th King's Own. Now, these differ in their uniform details deliberately from North Gloucester's. They didn't necessarily look different at the time, but I know that the King's Own had been in America slightly longer than the 49th, and thus these have got the altered uniform details. They've changed their headgear, etc. And the officer and the sergeant have gone with the slightly Americanized uniform detail of having buckskin breeches, a bit more hard wearing. And this just enabled me to use different options for within the kit. It doesn't mean they had different uniforms. In front of them here, you have half a dozen troopers from the 16th Light Dragoons operating in the dismounted role. These were very smart, fun uniforms to paint. This was the first group I painted for the force as well. I particularly like working on their tarlatan helmets and the leopard print bits and pieces. And in common with all the sort of skirmishing or firing packs from Perry, they've got some great dynamic poses. Alongside them here as a potential leader figure is an officer I've painted as a member of the Coldstream Guards based on his waist sash. He may get used to that group, he may not. I've got some options as a consequence, but another little fun figure to paint. And then finally, probably what's my favourite group in their smart Germanic uniforms, distinct from the British, are these Hessian Jaegers and their officer figure on the right, who I've popped a rifle in the hand of there. There's something very pleasing about the colour scheme of dark green and red, and then the sort of off-white breeches, the sort of wider turnbacks and lapels. Very pleasing, and I put a few extra hours work into bits of things like nominal wood grain and sharpening up details here and there. But yeah, they're probably my favourite figures, and again, some really good poses in the group there from the sculpting. That completes this look at the British force. I may go on to add a few things in the future. There are a few more character figures that I might add, including maybe a mounted officer later on, maybe a small group of Indians to accompany them, and maybe some additions to the 4th King's Own as well to give them a bit more bulk. But apart from that, I hope you've enjoyed having a look at the collection, and in the meantime, happy hobbying.